At the border with Belarus, the head of the Polish Ministry of Internal Affairs and Administration and the deputy head of the Ministry of Defence from the Civic Platform Party met journalists to convince them how good Polish security is and that it will get even better. The budget we are allocating to national defence in 2026 is a record 200 billion zloty. This is almost a quarter of the entire budget of the Republic of Poland. There is no other country in NATO that spends such funds on its security in relation to GDP. The problem with the government is that the devil is in the detail, and defence spending, contrary to what the current authorities claim, is not as high as the ruling party would have us believe. The ruling party is deceiving the public by talking about 5% of defence spending, or that they have allocated 200 billion zloty to defence. They are not spending the amounts they have budgeted for. In 2024, they did not spend over 20 billion zloty. The financial problems of the Ministry of National Defence are a fact. They say that we will spend 200 billion zloty, but there will be less money in the state budget because the real increase in defence spending is 0.4%. Inflation itself is forecast at 3% in 2026. So in relation to this inflation target, we will be spending less on defence. All the more so as more and more facts related to the level of funding for Polish defence are coming to light, thanks to next year's budget bill, which is already in the same. I don't think we are surprised. We know that for the Civic Coalition and the left, defence spending has never been a priority. It is clear that they also feel safe in the context of the war going on in Ukraine and Russia. If they did not feel safe, they would obviously look for savings elsewhere, not in defence. And so, for example, ammunition for the Korean Chonmu missile launchers, that is, the Polish HOMAR-K project. As revealed by the former head of the Polish Ministry of National Defence, the current authorities are blocking the purchase of ammunition for these launchers. The Ministry of Finance has suspended funding for missiles for the Chonmu missile system and modernisation expenditure, which concern the most important part of the Ministry of National Defence activities, that is, strengthening the Polish army. In the draft budget for next year are over 9 billion zloty less than in the budget that is being implemented in 2025. And the government, which promises mountains of gold for defence, is unable to find 10 billion zloty for missiles for launches that we already have. And what does the Civic Platform say about this? The party's message of the day comes to the rescue. The expenditures planned in next year's budget are significantly higher for defence. Additional funds will also go to the Polish budget. We are buying modern systems and investing in the Polish army, and today that is the overriding goal. For now, the head of the Ministry of National Defence can also count on the loyalty of his subordinates in the Polish People's Party. A little less lying, a little less hate. Let's ask the Minister of Defence for more details, because it seems to me that Minister Kosiniak-Kamysz, when it comes to ammunition, has achieved the most of all governments so far. We have a serious problem with the entire process of modernising the armed forces. This process simply has no current plan. Buying planes without missiles, tanks without ammunition, howitzers without shells to fire, it's just ridiculous. We asked the Polish deputy head of the Ministry of Defence about the issue of missiles for HOMAR-K launches. Will there be no purchase of missiles for the Chonmu launchers? There will be all the necessary resources that will give us a capability for national air defence. Is this a necessary measure, Minister? Of course. The Deputy Minister declined to comment on the cuts in next year's budget for technical modernisation and military infrastructure investment, key areas related to strengthening Poland's defence capabilities. It is high time that citizens realise that the government's poor economic policy, which is completely ineffective, has a significant impact on the country's security system, because without sufficient funds we are simply unable to build a strong army that will deter our enemies. Interestingly, the current authorities link military spending to Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk's unfulfilled promises, starting with the current head of the Chancellery of the Prime Minister, who uses defence spending to explain the lack of an increase in the tax-free allowance. If we postpone the rearmament of the Polish army and, for example, lowered taxes now, because the increase in military spending is many times higher than the cost of lowering taxes, we would, of course, fulfil one of the 100 specific promises, but we would not fulfil the most important promise for Poles, namely the sense of security as quickly as necessary. This year's defence spending is lower than expected, and next year it is to be reduced further. Another issue is the number of jobs in the army, which in the draft budget of the Ministry of Defence for next year is falling by over 14,000. Today there is not enough money to carry out the tasks resulting from commitments and agreements that have already been made. That is why there is no room for soldiers or those who want to continue their service in the Polish army by participating in specialist training, or for those who want to become professional soldiers. We have seen a threefold decline in the rate of recruitment to the service. We have seen a slowdown in key arms contracts, some of which have been suspended altogether. And worst of all, there is a complete financial crisis in the Polish Ministry of National Defence. What is the solution to Poland's defence problems after 2 years of the December 13th coalition government? To keep repeating that everything is fine. The Turów lignite mine has just scored another legal victory over an allegedly ecological organisation. This time, the Supreme Administrative Court refused to allow the German organisation Greenpeace to participate in the concession proceedings for the Turów lignite mine, agreeing with the arguments put forward by the company that runs the mine, PGE Górnictwo i Energetyka Konwencjonalna. The Supreme Administrative Court also pointed out that refusing to allow civic organisations to participate in concession proceedings does not violate EU law, which leaves member states free to set limits on the participation of social organisations. This is another good step forward for Turów, because these organisations are not environmental organisations, they are eco-terrorists, whose main task is to shut down Polish industry. They do nothing in neighbouring countries, nothing in Russia or China. Their goal is to use money from abroad to shut down Polish companies. 6 months ago, the Polish branch of this international non-governmental organisation was involved in the occupation of one of the excavators working in the mine. The German branch wanted to participate in the Turów concession proceedings. We should stand firm on the position that where it is not necessary, where it is not required, they should simply not participate in these proceedings. In this case, we all know that the decisions preceding the concession were themselves preceded by environmental proceedings which were very broad and involved non-governmental organisations, and all comments could have been submitted there. The ruling in the Greenpeace case is final. But this is not the only case in which Turów has come out unscathed. Previous cases concerned the refusal to allow Eco-Unia Association and the Frank Bold Foundation to participate in the concession proceedings. In addition, there were attempts to force the closure of Turów, including those by the Czech Republic, which expressed its willingness to supply Poland with electricity in such a case. Turów was a place where the interests of 3 countries intersected. In fact, 2 countries, the Czech Republic and Germany, are using their influence on the Polish energy sector to make us dependent on their energy. Germany is building lignite-fired power stations on its side. The Czechs have the most power plants and they are operating there. But the attack has always been on Turów. The mine and power plant in Turów supply southwestern Poland. They employ several thousand people.
Mam nadzieję, że pamiętacie Państwo jeszcze dzisiaj.
I hope you remember how the current ruling party, when it was still in opposition, said that the Turów mine had to be closed if other interest groups, such as those in Germany, wanted it. We were in a critical situation. We fought. We did not even accept the ruling. We appealed against it. I cannot imagine a situation in which Turów would be closed. The energy company PGE, Górnictwo i Energetyka Konwencjonalna, has repeatedly emphasized that the complex consisting of the mine and power plant meets all legal and environmental standards, and in recent years a number of investments have been made to ensure that its operation has the least possible impact on the surrounding environment. The Turów mine meets all environmental requirements, and many investments have been made on its premises to minimize its impact on the surrounding area. The Turów mine uses modern technologies to reduce dust and noise emissions and monitors the state of the environment. An underground screen has been built to protect the surrounding areas from groundwater runoff, as well as a dust screen and an acoustic embankment on the border with Germany. The concession for coal mining in the Turów mine is valid until 2044.
Just hours after some 20 Russian drones entered Polish airspace last month, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said it was time for Europe to build a drone wall to protect its eastern flank. Drone incidents over airports in Denmark and Germany in the following weeks reinforced European leaders' view that the continent urgently needs better protection against such threats. The EU is planning a functional drone wall against Russia by the end of 2027.
Drone wall we see as part of bigger project, which now is called Eastern Flank Watch. Really, we are facing clear challenges. Russia is testing the EU and NATO, and our response must be firm, united, and immediate.
Europe is now mobilizing pooling resources and looking at this plan to build a so-called drone wall to defend European airspace. So that would involve perhaps drone interceptors to stop Russian drones getting in, a network of radars and other systems largely influenced by what the Ukrainians have done. And they've been under relentless assault from drones from Russia almost night after night. The drone wall is, of course, in its early stages, but the Baltic states are very keen on this, so stretching down through the Baltics, Poland, Germany is also within range of a lot of these Russian drones, and it's about integrating all of your air defense assets to work together in tandem, from ground radars, fighter jets, cheap interceptor drones, missiles, the whole range of capabilities and electronic warfare to jam these drones, all working in tandem around the clock. It's quite a challenge.
But the drone wall proposal remains in flux, according to more than half a dozen officials and diplomats familiar with internal EU deliberations, who spoke to Reuters about the project.
The big challenge for the drone wall is to shoot these drones down or take them down with electronic warfare in a cost-effective way. You just can't be firing hundreds or even thousands of $1 million or $500,000 missiles at these drones that generally cost about $50,000 each. It's hard to put a firm price on these things. It's always changing, but that would not be sustainable from an industrial-based perspective or a cost perspective. That would be the Russians imposing a huge cost on us. So the challenge is to get the technologies, cheap interceptor drones, get the costs down. Perhaps lasers, we have the technology, we just haven't scaled it up yet.
The drone project is a test of the EU's ambitions to play a greater role in defense, traditionally the preserve of national governments in NATO, as well as Europe's ability to take more responsibility for its own security, as demanded by U.S. President Donald Trump. The Commission, the EU's executive body, has been trying to win over southern and western European governments, which argued the original idea was too focused on the bloc's eastern border, when drones could pose a threat across the whole continent. The Russian incursion into Polish airspace on September 9th highlighted how ill-prepared EU countries currently are to tackle the threat posed by swarms of drones, adding to the sense of urgency. NATO deployed F-35 and F-16 fighter jets, helicopters, and a Patriot air defense system collectively worth billions of dollars to respond to Russian Gerber drones, based on Iranian Shahed models that cost a tiny fraction of the price.
After more than 2 years, Hamas terrorists who kidnapped, tortured, and ultimately murdered Israeli hostages are returning their bodies to their families. The first convoy with the bodies of 3 victims has arrived in Israel. People are gathered along the route.
I'm here with my son because we wanted to pay our last respect for the 4 hostages, the dead hostages that came back. This is a very, very sad day for us. We don't know who they are, but they are a part of us, a part of our people, a brother, a father, someone that we cared about, and we wanted to see him back home.
This man is still waiting for the body of his son, who was killed by Hamas.
So it's a bizarre feeling where you start the day anticipating to get the worst phone call that you will in your lifetime, and then feel disappointed when you do not get that phone call.
Those who survived Hamas captivity are also returning home and, after more than 700 days, can finally hug their loved ones.
He said that the last few months since the deal collapsed and Israel went back into fighting was harder. There was almost less food or not so much food. Once again, very little water and dirty water. And the fact that they didn't know what's going on. Every once in a while they heard that there is negotiation and then not. And they felt like they've been abandoned.
The hostages would not have been able to return home if it weren't for Donald Trump's peace plan. The families of those released have no doubt about that.
We have Trump. We love Trump. Trump is the best.
No one here has any doubts about that. The American leader not only brought about the exchange of prisoners, but also stopped the bloodshed in the region. And gave hope that peace between the sides, which have been at odds for decades, is possible, under certain conditions, of course.
If they don't disarm, we will disarm them. They know I'm not playing games, okay? Now, we did something monumental. We got the hostages back. That was the first thing we had to do. Above all else, get the hostages back.
The goal is peace in the Gaza Strip and throughout the Middle East. The cessation of fighting in the Gaza Strip and the withdrawal of Israeli troops behind the Yellow Line does give the civilian population a respite. So it is certainly a very big success for Donald Trump. But Trump is not stopping at the Middle East. He also intends to bring about a ceasefire in Ukraine. At the end of the week, he will meet with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky again at the White House. The United States supports Ukraine and will not allow Russia to seize or destroy Ukraine just to prevent Ukraine from moving closer to the West. We are at a crucial moment, and what happens on Friday may give us a better idea of what the administration's next steps will be. The stakes are high. Ukraine's rearmament and perhaps specifics will be revealed about the super-precise Tomahawk missiles that may end up in the Ukrainian army's arsenal. Putin would certainly not want to find out just how effective they are, so he may be more inclined to sit down at the negotiating table.